What you're seeing here is the end of Europe's golden age of steam railways. The old night ferry has left this platform at London Victoria, bound for Paris and Brussels for the last time. It wasn't much to write home about. All that clanking and shunting on the Channel boats made it the most insomniac of sleeping trains. And yet it was the very last link with the days when European rail travel was still an adventure. Britain's last international passenger train. A hangover from an age no more than a generation ago, when this was the only way to travel. For 100 years, excited passengers have been crossing these platforms. Posh English trippers off to the preferred watering holes of Montreux or Biarritz. Politicians or shady agents en route to the melting pot of the Balkans. But mainly, just people who liked a bit of adventure, off to join the eastbound, steam-hauled Orient Expresses. And now I'm travelling east too. How far I'll have to go to find traces of those old days, I just don't know. For much of the journey over the Alps, I'll be travelling in the best trains that modern Europe has to offer. But above all, this is a journey of the imagination, a journey through a world of railways that's already gone.
Try to think of the way it used to be. Perhaps you've got fond memories of travelling this way in the 40s and 50s, when there was all the time in the world, and the steam still carried with it a surge of excitement. The view from the window was just a B feature before the main attraction. Perhaps you'd considered going by one of those aeroplanes that were already forcing such changes on long-distance trains. But you decided against it. What you wanted was a cruise by railway, when the travelling was a holiday in itself. It was worth saving up for, and great fun while it lasted. Perhaps it was never quite so good as memory and the movies would have us believe. Have you forgotten the noise and the soot? Do you remember the drafts and delays? Perhaps not. What remains in the mind's eye is the image of a dash across Paris and boarding a train to distant places at the Gare de Lyon. You still can. So what takes our fancy? Milan or south to Marseille? The east, perhaps, through Vienna to Budapest in the track of the Istanbul train. Well, certainly a trip to the east will give us more chance of finding steam trains, and it'll show us a lot more railways. That's why we won't take the direct route. We've got a week to travel, a week of changing trains, stopping where we like, and starting with a touch of class.
Sur Poissy, le très rapide Trans-Europe Express 23, le Cisalpin, départ 12h15 en première classe. Attention, ce train est
42. Au milieu du train, après la voiture part. Hein. Au milieu. You speak English?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? You are in the middle of the train, car number 8.
Le Cisalpin, Trans-Europe Express, may not have the romantic look of earlier trains, but it has its compensations. Another worth bearing in mind in future is it always leaves on time. There isn't a better way to start our journey. These are the first-class continental trains, the internationalist dream, running across the frontiers of a dozen countries in much the same way that the luxury coaches of the Wagon-Lit Company did 100 years before them. Le Cisalpin, getting us to our first destination on Lake Geneva in 4.5 hours of quiet, air-conditioned comfort. The first thing to do, of course, is to weigh up our fellow travellers. They're certainly not the elite bunch who would have journeyed with a century ago. I guess there isn't a middle European king or end-of-the-line archduchess amongst them. Hardly a spy or an arms dealer. Just the routine traffic of our more mundane, multinational business. Yet we're in the debt of those early trains, the privileged expresses that eventually extended the privilege of travel to the rest of us. Before them, we were bound in by the narrow circles of city or village life, until the tracks went over the horizon. Of course, some of the early delights of train travel are still with us. We can still nibble at the pleasures of the rich and famous. Fast food has a different meaning on Trans-Europe Express. In the best traditions of wagon-lit service, the waiters still get by in 3 or 4 languages, still assume that we recognize the dishes on today's menu as old friends, but are still prepared to discuss with a quiet American what's the next best thing to Californian claret. Admittedly, you won't get out for much less than £10 a head, but perhaps that's only to be expected in a restaurant with one of the best views in Europe.
Mesdames, Messieurs, nous arrivons à Vallorbe. Ladies and gentlemen, we are arriving at Vallorbe.
Our first border, France into Switzerland, accomplished with the smoothness of 100 years of practice. It's a 7-minute stop, just long enough to take the customs and immigration men on board and change engines. But that's the flaw in the system. These Trans-Europe Expresses, born in the 50s, were going to unite Europe as never before, using the same trains everywhere, taking their bookings by computer. They've already failed.
Merci.
The locomotives may be all electric, but there are still 4 different voltages in use in Europe. The network, controlled by a different country every 4 years, hasn't been able to agree on the type of service to offer, or even something as simple as the colour of the trains. The railways are as nationalist a business now as they were when the staff of the Orient Expresses smoothed the unfamiliar business of passport control. Soon perhaps Le Cisalpin will be as out of place and time as the great European resort the railways created. Soon its arrival at Lake Geneva will be no more than a picture for the scrapbooks, a photograph pasted a few pages on from the holiday snaps of earlier days, from the years when this corner of Switzerland was Little England in the season. The well-to-do came to Montreux to take the Alpine air and have a last fling before the sun set on the golden age. Some, like Kay Dalrymple, stayed.
A lot of people have passed through here. They seem to be rather quiet people, whether they came here to recollect themselves because it was a beautiful spot and it was quiet and the view is magnificent, and you have the lake, which was in those days not polluted. So it was quiet making. You could go for trips on the boat. From here, people went up to Lyon, which is very easy with the little trains, or to Caux, which they did a lot, of course. And it was a relaxing place.
A place packaged by the railway companies. Wagon-Lit was here, and hotels to match the excellence of their trains.
They used to have the dancing here in what is now the music room. And they had a band, and we used to have tea and dance in the middle of the room, very sedate with our chaperones, of course. And we had our private parties, we had our dances, of course, we had our special group. And we used to go to what's now the Hazy Land, which was called the Pavillon des Sports in those days. So you could go every afternoon and have tea there and dance. And now and then we had a concert. There was a lot of dancing in the Grand Hotel, which had a big room for people used to come there. I feel it's one of the places you can go and live when you're very old. But otherwise I wouldn't come here. It's too noisy now.
But there are new attractions. The commonplace of Quai Dalrymple's day, preserved in axle grease in the hills above Montreux. Once the line from Blonay to Chambly was one of 100 rural steam railways. Now it's 3 miles of track and worked by amateurs. The part-time world of Preservation Society president François Bossard.
Vous savez que dans la vie, on réalise des fois, je dirais, un petit peu des rêves d'enfance où on essaye de retrouver ce qu'on a vécu autrefois. Et mon premier intérêt n'a pas été pour le chemin de fer directement, mais pour les bateaux à vapeur. Et j'avais un grand-père qui était ingénieur comme moi, qui m'avait conduit sur les bateaux à vapeur du lac, où on voyait encore les machines à piston, il y en a encore quelques-unes. Et c'est lorsque, en 1968, j'ai entendu parler qu'il y avait une société qui allait se constituer pour remettre en service et conserver du matériel à vapeur, je me suis dit, eh bien voilà, un bateau à vapeur c'est très grand, une machine ça sera un petit peu plus petit. Je me suis intéressé, je me suis approché, et maintenant ça fait des années que j'œuvre à cette société.
The passion of Monsieur Bossard firing the imagination of a new type of visitor.
I've got a Schaffner coming up, nice. Come on, Charlie boy, keep coming this way. That's
They're a bit different from milords and ladies who used to live it up here. For one thing, they actually want to get close to the machines that frighten the horses.
So if we go down to the end there, we can get her coming back down their tender first. She reverses at Blonay, and we can pick her up again somewhere near the tunnel mouth.
An ecstasy of rivets and steam pipes that export manager Bill Alborough has captured for a more modern package holiday market.
We began way back now, about 1970, I suppose it would be, when really, after having been on 2 or 3 other people's trips and found that in a lot of instances here they were travelling overnight for most of the time, we thought that getting a bit older and a bit wiser, this sort of thing, we try and put people up in reasonable quality hotels and get a lot of fun out of it. You know, wine, women and song as well as steam train.
What I'd like to know is if they're going to put the Fokker-Oberth rack tank back in order.
But you know, really, she's pretty classic in French lines.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. If I proves me wrong,
It's cold.
Yes.
But do you remember when we were in the States earlier this year, we were having a problem with the Americans? Because, let's face it, the Americans don't know much about running railroads anyway, do they?
Yeah, I've just come back from East Germany a fortnight ago, and I was in South Africa at Easter. Last year I managed to visit about 10 different countries, actually, although not all in the pursuit of steam trains. We went to Spain, Portugal, Italy, Romania. Can I mention Yugoslavia? Several places, I can't really remember them all now.
I like travel, and I also like railways, and if you put the two together, the one makes a very good excuse for the other.
it gets in the blood. You know, it's very much steam in the blood, I suppose.
The first run of Europe's newest luxury train. This season you can travel through the scenery of Switzerland's Golden Pass in the comfort of the Mountain Pullman Express.
At the end of the Blonay-Chambly line in 1931, you could pick up not just any old Pullman, but the only narrow-gauge Pullman in the world. An electric train just out of its box, taking the corners like a Hornby model as it wound its way to the smarter ski resorts of the Bernese Oberland. Luxury had even found its way off the beaten track. Today it's a 2-hour kaleidoscopic trip in the Panoramic Express. Tourists, the breed that first inspired these railways, are still its most important customers. Private, narrow-gauge Montreux Oberland-Bernois Railway has made its living since the turn of the century by bringing trippers round the mountain to Cisalpin. At which point all changed to the less panoramic rolling stock of the private but this time standard gauge Bern-Lurchburg-Simplon Railway. It's just across the platform, our connection for the hour-long haul to Interlaken. This is certainly not the route for people who object to changing trains. Across Switzerland, you could take almost 100 journeys and never use the same railway company twice. Interlaken spoils you with its choice of liveries. Switzerland's just a giant train set, really, where generations of fathers and sons have added more track and extra trains whenever it's taken their fancy. With the single-mindedness of men who make railways their hobby, the Swiss are even prepared to pay for them when they lose money. And anyway, in a nation suffering from referendum disease of epidemic proportions, it's almost impossible to get agreement to close them. Mind you, the private companies don't have the layout entirely to themselves. There's even a proper state-owned system. Our fourth train of the day is on the only narrow-gauge line of the Swiss Federal Railways. This is the Switzerland of the less energetic Victorians. Not the high Alps, but the fringe of the mountains. A view of the snow from the comfort of a travelling rug and a good book. And over there, Meiringen, where Sherlock Holmes had his nastiest encounter. Then the climb, not relying on legs, too steep for ordinary wheels. We're on the rack, a painfully slow 20 miles an hour, as the teeth of the cogwheels under the engine and carriages wind us more than 3,000 feet to the top of the Brunig Pass. An up and over railway, with no more than a moment's silent running at the summit, before we're plunging into the 1 in 10 or 1 in 12 gradients. We drop to the shores of the lake of the four forest cantons and a night in Lucerne. Make the most of it. There's a stiffer climb tomorrow. Our third day, and one that'll have to start without breakfast if we're to see this, our 8th train, being loaded. The early morning up goods, just about to climb out of its terminus on the other side of the lake. This is the milk round, the brewery dray, and the fruit and veg van, all rolled into one, for the people who live without a road on Rigi Mountain. It's the school bus, too. And at the other end of a life, the ambulance or the hearse. Picturesque and quaint it may be, but the Witznau Rigi Bahn isn't surviving for any reasons of sentiment. It's been getting the mails and the supplies through without a break since the day in 1871, when in the middle of the turmoil of the Franco-Prussian War, it was opened as Europe's first mountain railway. Once it was a steam trip all the way. Steam-driven paddles to the Witznau pier, then behind kneeling black locomotives to the top of the mountain. They still dust off engines from the 1920s every summer, because the Rigi is a special occasions railway as well. For the people of Lucerne, it's the very place to hold a birthday party, to celebrate an engagement, or to toast a bride. You certainly need a head for heights. When Mark Twain travelled this way, he felt that the 1 in 5 gradients, and being quite so close to the edge, provide a good opportunity for remembering his sins and repenting of them. Today it's the Japanese who are among the best party customers. But mainly it's still the Swiss themselves, having an ethnic knees up, while congratulating themselves for having the nous to hang on to railways that other less sensible nations may have closed a generation ago. If you haven't been invited to the party, you can always console yourself with the view from the top. What goes up? Yes, of course, you've guessed. Comes down by a different railway and a separate company on the other side. The Art Goldau Regiebahn may be something of a poor relation to other blue trains in the world, but because the Swiss take everything, and particularly railways, with the utmost seriousness, it still connects at the bottom of the mountain with the federal mainline expresses to Zurich. There's always something reassuring about railway stations in the morning. The victory of timetable efficiency over human weakness. We may not be sufficiently awake to know what day of the week it is, but the railway has already been up and about for hours. Whilst we're still marvelling at how these strange Europeans can really eat salami and drink schnapps at breakfast, our train has already been dressed for the day. But I suppose everything should run smoothly here. They've had enough practice after all. Since the very first departure of transcontinental railways, this has been the turntable of Europe. When the Swiss are being very British and refuse to bring their clocks into line with the rest of their neighbours, the ripple runs through the timetables of half a dozen countries. Whether you're travelling west to east like us, or north to south, you can scarcely avoid using Switzerland as a staging post. This station alone handles 1,000 trains a day. Long after the prestige of railways died, guards and drivers here are still engaged on work of national importance, and they have a uniform to prove it. They were experts in courteous passenger handling long before airports began to abuse the privilege. And most remarkable of all, it seems that wherever you come from, they actually understand what you say.
Does this go all the way to Vienna? I don't have to change anymore. Thank you.
230, 384 Tonnen. Und Airbremsgewicht 554.
The departure. To the Swiss, a moment of religious observance. It would, of course, be a sin if the train was late.
Track 3, express train Cisalpin to Innsbruck, Salzburg, Vienna. Attention, departure.
The Transalpine, and the longest part of our journey. 10 hours to Vienna, another border crossing, the track of the Austrian state railways, and the sweep of the Tyrol. It's simply the best train the Österreichische Bundesbahnen has to offer. The star of this single main line to the east. We've settled into the routine. The first hours belong to the scenery. But then, even in the Tyrol, you begin to feel you've seen that bit before. The train turns in on itself. With the polite bow that summons you to lunch, it starts to take on the feeling of a not unpleasant 70-mile-an-hour hotel. It's got all the same advantages: a captive audience, people to overhear, anonymity if you want it. We know why we're booked in, but surely you've often wondered, what makes someone want to work here? That waiter, for example.
Arbeiten tue ich nun genau 3 Jahre hier. Und warum ich da lieber arbeiten tue, Punkt A, mehr Freizeit. Und Punkt B, meiner Meinung nach, ist da einfach viel mehr Bewegung, viel mehr Leute, internationale Leute kommen öfter her. Und man hat einfach einen anderen Kontakt mit Leuten als in einem normalen Restaurant.
Or the chef. How can he possibly turn out haute cuisine in a broom cupboard?
Der Unterschied ist zu einer Großküche, dass man, sagen wir, weniger Weg zurückzulegen hat. Und der zweite Grund, warum ich hier arbeite, ist der, dass ich erstens einmal relativ viel Freizeit habe und dann doch irgendwie in Europa ein bisschen umherkomme und andere Leute und andere Städte sehe.
You can understand why the manager does it. It's fun being boss, in charge of the mobile staff. But how do you get the top job on a 5-star train?
Vor 25 Jahren habe ich bei der österreichischen Bundesbahn als Schaffner begonnen. Zuerst bei den Güterzügen, später dann bei den Personenzügen im Nahverkehr, noch etwas später dann bei den Schnellzügen. Seit circa 10 Jahren bin ich Zugführer hier bei den Schnellzügen. Und meine Aufgabe ist, den Zug vor der Abfahrt vorzubereiten, das heißt, die Wagen zu notieren, das Gewicht, dem Lokführer zu sagen, wie lang der Zug ist, wie schwer der Zug ist. Und für alle Besonderheiten beim Zug bin ich eigentlich verantwortlich.
Fine. Rather nice. Okay. Right, okay.
Now this is the beauty of our journey with a camera. We can stop where the Cisalpin doesn't. We can take a roll of film and join the other British visitors on a railway straight out of the pages of Thomas the Tank Engine. The Cisalpin tank engines are rather more aristocratic names, and sadly they don't have a fat controller. But they do have Derek Mayman, who's very kind to them. Every year he leaves briefcase and business suit at his factory in the Midlands and slips into something more comfortable, the overalls and oily rags of the footplateman. It may be his holiday, but it's no less serious a business.
If one comes to work, then one's got to take a proper turn and do somebody's work right through the shift. You can't expect people to come on first thing in the morning, put everything ready, just for you to step onto the footplate and do the easy stuff. So you've really got to take somebody's place and do the whole job, otherwise it's not a fair deal, is it?
This is no part-time railway. For the people who live and work along the valley from Jenbach here on the main line, up to the terminus at Meyerhofen, the Zilla is as important as any intercity express. Freight is transferred, wagons and all, from Austrian state railways onto its 2-foot private track. Unlike its nationalised neighbour, that needs millions of shillings in subsidy every year, this line just about breaks even, with a little help from its friends. If you hate railway museums with all those lifeless, frozen exhibits, then this is the place to come. Here they don't worship steam engines, it's just good sense to attract thousands of railway collectors every year. It makes the balance sheet look healthier. They leave it to us to be romantic. It's an interlude we can recapture in our holiday snaps.
Nice with the mountain in the background, if only it wasn't for that great big pylon.
But we'll have to keep travelling. The Zilla is a gem, but it doesn't have proper steam engines. You know, big ones, on mainline trains.
Can I have some more film, please, Steve?
Perhaps we'll find those where the Cisalpin is taking us. We settle down for the tail end of our journey, woken up by the shunting at Rosenheim as we run into Germany for a few kilometres. Snoozing again by the time we get to Salzburg, charting our position by glimpses of passing stations and the clock in our stomachs.
We want to point out that there is a restaurant car in this train, and we ask you to kindly take advantage of this service. The direction to the restaurant car is indicated by an illuminated arrow in the corridor of your coach. Thank you.
Should we thank the lady who tempts us to the dining car? Where does she go between announcements?
Meine Damen und Herren, Schnellzug 249 von Sargans über Innsbruck, Kitzbühel und Zell am See mit Kurswagen von Kehl über Stuttgart und München fährt ein. Bitte Vorsicht.
Tonight, Chris Lohner will already be back at her proper job, announcing on Austrian television. Her calls to dinner and welcoming arrivals are sadly nothing more than cassettes.
It started out very funny because somebody asked me if I could do the announcement in English, French and German for the Cisalpin, and that was it. And I thought that was it too. But actually, it was the beginning of a whole lot of work, and now I end up doing all the announcement for the Austrian railways. And I really enjoyed it. It's a complete different work from what I do, you know, usually I work on television, I talk in the radio, where there is much more personal engagement in it. I mean, you don't engage yourself by doing an announcement when the train leaves or arrives. I mean, you don't show any feelings, or you are happy or unhappy. I mean, actually it doesn't matter, you just stick to the text and you do it as it is being asked from you, you know.
Wir treffen in Kürze in Wien ein.
We will arrive in Vienna in a few minutes.
Nous arriverons dans quelques minutes à Vienne.
Wien Westbahnhof, Wien Westbahnhof.
It's everything we expected Vienna to be. Good food and tasteful music. A little restaurant up in the woods somewhere. Except it's the station Kaff. We won't find many railway pie jokes on the Westbahnhof. Here the station is more than somewhere to depart from as quickly as possible. It's a place to eat and meet by choice rather than necessity. But once, you could have looked out from the platforms of the old Westbahnhof and seen that this was not a place of happy meetings. The trains still came, as if life in Vienna was running on schedule. The Nazi Orient Express brought officials of the High Command, and the next train to arrive on platform 2 carried the red star of occupation on its smokebox door. But whoever came, the people still died in the rubble, and the old world of pre-war railways died too, amid the ruins of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The survivors of Europe put on a new face. There were new appointments to keep, but the old prestige expresses would no longer carry people to them. They were symbols of an age we wanted to forget. It's only with the distortion of memory that we smile a little and pretend they could have survived. Mind you, bits of those old trains do survive, after a fashion.
Meine Damen und Herren, Expresszug 263, Orient Express nach Bukarest über Hegschalon, Budapest.
There's even a remnant of the Orient Express, a fallen woman of a train now, a grubby daily to Bucharest that scarcely justifies the honour of being called an express at all. Once the most capitalist of trains, it's now had its name pinched to boost the business on a cheap run to Romania. The routes that once echoed to first-class passenger traffic have now been usurped by freight. This is what brings prestige to the railways now. This is where profits grease the sliding away of national frontiers. Here today, Hull tomorrow, in a roundabout of heavy haulage that leaves lorries standing and notches up one small advance in the battle with the airlines. It's the passengers that have been in retreat, because people simply aren't as profitable, not a patch on containers. But if we pause for a moment in a corner of the Vienna Südbahnhof, we can watch nervous preparation for the arrival of a special passenger train. The Cisalpin Express has found a role for itself across these borders of Eastern Europe. This is a train for poor people. Everyone here knows it as the emigrant train. Arriving at dawn each day from Moscow, the compartments of the Cisalpin carry among their passengers the flotsam of political repression. Little scenes from other people's lives. Carrying everything they own, these are the families and bits of families that count themselves lucky, lucky to have got the exit visa, which allows them freedom after perhaps years of struggle. For these people, Vienna is the neutral stronghold, where the struggle stops. For us, it's a new start, too. A journey to the fringe of the world that they've left behind. 5 days out from London, we're going to raise a corner of their curtain and slip across the frontier into Hungary. It can be a nervous moment, waiting for the train to leave. Will it be as sinister as preconceptions and imagination have told us? Is it significant that the Lehar Express is our 13th train? We'll know soon enough. There's just an hour of Austria left, until we arrive at the checkpoint called Hegyalon. I suppose this is what we expected. Soldiers, guns, a search of the train while we're invited to change our money.
Where are you going?
Budapest.
Change money. Change money.
Change money?
Yeah.
How much? How much do we have to change?
Thank you.
Thank you.
A change of engines too, but at least this one brings a dining car with it.
Thank you. Show me the happy now.
It's taken just half an hour to check our passports and visas 4 times and send us on our way. Three hours to Budapest. tracking the Danube across the northern plain of Hungary, running through a flat landscape that still bears the scars of its history. This is the poor end of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, fought over and bartered in a score of European conflicts. In the last war, levelled in punishment for not knowing what side it was on. And always, the railways were destroyed, because military men, at least, know how important they are. Rebuilding has been a slow business, because Hungary had little help. Its new masters had long memories and saw the advantages of a generation of poverty. But eventually business sense prevailed. They didn't have to like the West to trade with them, and trade needed trade routes, the access to markets that new lines through Hungary provided. Tourists like us are a bearable inconvenience too. We bring hard currency, and if it's necessary to woo us with the frivolity of flowers and a glass of wine on the table, then so be it. We'll be made welcome, unofficially. At Kaleti Station, our terminus in Budapest, the rules will be bent a little. The hand of state enterprise can't entirely cover the fact that this is a capitalist city, a city that just can't be persuaded it's not part of the West. It's not surprising. Families have shared Vienna and Budapest ever since the old extravagant days of Austro-Hungary. It'll take more than a new line on the map to break the habit. The government has given in. Austrians no longer need a visa to come here. Magyar Államvasutak, the Hungarian state railway, brings them from the border in their thousands. They come to buy food that's cheaper than at home. The story goes that the Viennese used to come here for their Viennese sausage. They come now to stay a while with the other half of their family and grumble together about this or that new Russian interference in their lives. And that's another thing they have in common. Neither the Austrians nor the ordinary Hungarians count the Soviet Union among their friends. It would be to forget their history if they did. But the people of these twin cities that straddle the Danube recognize that state control, for all the faults of the people who wield it, has its advantages. And nowhere are they more clearly seen than in the plan for transport. Buda and Pest can boast a truly integrated transport system. On the foundations laid by Hungarian private enterprise, because after all, Hungary was in at the start of the age of railways, the state has provided cheap, efficient travel for the people. Railways outgrew the financiers who conceived them. They became the great levelers, a socialist ideal. If we travel a little further, 6 or 7 kilometers into the forest above Budapest, we can find the nursery of that ideal. Children run the Pioneer Railway, learning to be Hungary's railwomen and railway women of the future. It's important in this society, too, to know how to run the trains on time.
Úttörő vasutas pajtás vagyok, az úttörő vasutat úttörők irányítják. 1950-ben indult meg az úttörővasút. Ide jó tanulók kerülhetnek 10 és 14 év között. Ha valaki továbbra is itt akar maradni, itt maradhat ifiként. A vasutas pajtások közül sokan válasszák hivatásukként a vasutat.
The people of the new railway. So are we too late to catch the generation of steam that we came so far to find? Almost, but their tracks led us to another frontier. On a reservation up near the border with Czechoslovakia, there they were. Dinosaurs grazing. Beasts from the mythology of railways, still a potent reminder of past endeavours. But no mainline train is entrusted to them now. They'll shunt freight into a brief twilight and then be allowed to go cold. It'll fall to the enginemen of Hungary to damp down the fires of European mainline steam. But when they do, it'll be with the conflicting sentiments of nostalgia and practicality experienced by men of the same breed in Doncaster or Crewe.
A gőzmozdonyon dolgoztam 30 évig, nagyon szerettem, nagyon a szívemhez nőtt. De tekintettel arra, hogy modernizáltunk, újabb dízelmozdonyokat kaptunk, ezeket is szeretni fogom. Természetesen könnyebb lesz nekünk a munka vele, és hát azért szeretem majd a dízelmozdonyokat is.
Hát én sajnálom egy kicsikét a gőzmozdonyt, mert abban nevelkedtem, abban nőttem föl, és most már megöregettem, így most már én úgyis nyugdíjba megyek, és a dízelek fognak most már jönni.
A dízel az jobb, kényelmesebb, mint a gőzös, ugye tiszta a munka. Hát azért ezzel is kell járni valakinek. Mindenki nem járhat a motoron.
We travelled 1,000 miles to be with them at the end. On the way, we saw many of the successes and some of the failures of the railways that replaced them. We found some countries passionate about railways as never before, and we're returning to a country with less resolve. We knew this was an image living long after its day, but we also knew it was worth seeing it before it faded for the last time. If we travel this way again, many more modern parts of the railway networks may have disappeared as well. There's already a new generation of European railway design. Out of the factories come trains that, like intercontinental jets, put real speed into travel and take every other scrap of pleasure out. Perhaps then we'll long for a reminder of the gentle Cisalpin. Perhaps we'll wish we had a moment to catch breath at Zurich, that the landscape was more than just a blur. But then it won't be so bad. Whichever way the trains go, we can still use our imagination.